Hello again, guys. This is Bobby with Madness Labs, and this week I'm going to be covering something that I've taken a deep dive in over the last couple weeks. One of our clients just decided to kind of rework their website. They had signed up with a service, and they had built them a pretty good website, and basically now we're kind of trying to in-house the whole project and really focus in on kind of key metrics and stuff like that. So we thought it'd be a really good time to try out Stencil to build a website. And this particular client also had quite a lot of blog content. So the original service that they were on had their own content management system, and then they had a blog, WordPress blog, kind of wired into it with like a theme that went along with it. So one of the things that the client said that he wanted was he wanted to be able to have granular control over a lot of the aspects of the theme. So what we did was we went ahead and took and kind of created our own WordPress theme with stencil components. And in doing so, we learned a lot about WordPress and a lot about stencil components, and thought it'd be really interesting to kind of push the pause button on the stuff that we were doing on Madness Labs. We've got some design stuff and some CSS and all these other things that we've been tweaking, but we thought it'd be cool to kind of just bring this to light. I know there's a lot of people that use WordPress. There's a lot of people that are wanting to get into Stencil and stuff. And so we wanted to kind of show you how we've implemented it with this client. And this is just a very basic example. Again, this is only, a week, and it hasn't been like a full-time week or anything. You know, but basically we've got a pretty good idea of how this implementation should work. And hopefully you can take that and run with it. So as always, I'll ask that you guys support us on Patreon. Hit us up. We love to make learning resources, and we've been putting more and more time, energy, money, and planning. You can see we even made a new title card for this video because we're really trying to put more into these things. So it'd be super helpful if you guys could pitch in a couple bucks, and we guarantee we will start putting out some premium content for people who back Madness Labs on Patreon. And then also links in the description. So check down there if you want to see. We've got a GitHub repository started. This isn't on there yet, but it will probably be, for people that are watching later on in the week. It'll probably be up later in the week with all of the kind of structure that we have here. And then also we've got linked to Stencil, the last cast. And if this is your first time joining us, hello. Thank you for joining us on our Madness casts. My wife will be probably popping in and out. She's the co-founder here at Madness Labs and the designer UI UX lead. So she might be popping in and out using the whiteboard behind me. And then as always, feel free to hit up the chat with anything that you might have questions on. Maybe you want further clarity. You just want to give a shout out. We've been known to give quite a few shout outs in our videos thus far. And then I guess with all of that being said, I will tell hello to everyone watching, and we will be off to the races. Okay, so I'm gonna jump to the screen here. So first off, like I've got a component here that I just started scaling, and let me pull up a screen, Chrome here, and I'll just kind of walk through what we currently have. So one thing to note, if you're going to be, if you're going to be doing this on your local machine, as I am, come on, Bobby, get your shit together. Get all your shit. Pack it up. Okay, so if you're going to be doing WordPress development on your local machine, as I am here, you're going to need to install some kind of local PHP web server. And so what I have is I have a examp. It's a if you've never heard of the LAMP stack or Windows WAMP stack or anything like that, it just basically means Apache, MySQL, and PHP. There's a bunch of different flavors for it. On Mac, it's called MAMP. On Windows, there's WAMP and Examp. And then on Linux, there's LAMP. and the L, M, and W are all Linux, Mac, and Windows respectively. So they are what's going to allow you to run PHP on your computer. So unlike JavaScript and all the stuff we've been using thus far, they all get rendered through Node, which is another web server. But PHP is its own language, and it's on, I think, like a good percentage. I'll say like upwards of 80% of the internet is running on PHP or Apache web servers. And then you're going to need that installed and configured in order to work on your WordPress locally. Also note that this solution should work if you're using some kind of shared hosting. As long as you have the ability to upload a theme and use your own custom theme, then this solution should work out for you fairly well. And that's really kind of what we've done here, is we've really kind of compartmentalized all the functionality into the theme itself. And that's what I'm going to be actually syncing up to GitHub, is this theme that will have stencil components, like the stencil build process and all that stuff. It'll be installed inside of a WordPress theme. And then the hope is that you can kind of take that and then just kind of upload that to your project and then pop it on over. So I guess the first thing to note here, so I started with a regular stencil project. So you can see here I've got my node modules, my source directory with my assets, my components. So all of that is the same. However, I then dragged an instance of WordPress. So I went to wordpress.org, I think it is. Yeah. So I went to WordPress, I downloaded the newest release, and then what I did was I just extracted it into the www directory. So you can see here I've got my WP content, my WP admin, all that kind of stuff. So I went ahead and just like put the full instance of WordPress into the www directory. So that way when I'm going to the index, it's loading up WordPress. Then what I did was I went out and got something, and I actually need to update my description here. I went out and got this. So there's something called roots. And you might have to, if you're Googling it, you might have to do roots WordPress. So roots.io, and again, I'll try to update the description here so that I can do that cool pointy thing I do. So Roots is a suite of tools, and basically they let you kind of very easily work with WordPress. So there is the Trellis, which is the tools that they have for like scaling up your own WordPress instance on your local machine or on a server. And you can see there they've got Lemp Stack. And then they've got Bedrock, which is WordPress project boilerplate, which is built with like very much, I don't know if they're using Laravel or if they're built like Laravel, but if you've ever worked with Laravel PHP framework, which we're super huge fans of here at Madness Labs, we're actually looking for another Laravel PHP developer at the moment. Basically, it makes working with WordPress like building a Laravel project. So super helpful. I have never used it myself, but the principle sounds awesome. Then we have Sage, which is here in my mouth. Then we have Sage, and Sage is just the WordPress starter theme. So it's like a build of what a WordPress theme, if it were built with like Composer and all the front end build tools. The problem with it, as I started to develop the WordPress application, what I ran into was the fact that like I had two different build processes going on. I had the build process for the components, then I had a build process for actually like working with the WordPress theme, and so they were just very different. And then at the same time, there was like two sets of like, there was the CSS files that I had over here, then there was the SCSS files and all the other stuff that I had from the Sage WordPress theme, and so they were really just like fighting each other. And so I probably could have scaled up a WordPress theme from scratch and had it be just as well, because I ended up with something that's very bare bones. But that being said, I went through and I kind of ripped out all of the build process stuff for Sage, and that left me with just kind of like the bare necessities. And this is kind of what it looks like. So if we open up, and hopefully you guys can see this all right. So, and if it's not looking the greatest, I don't know. I've been told that it's legible and that it's great. I see in the panel here that's like at 360p, which to me is like terrible. But again, if it doesn't look great, let me know, and I'll see if I can tweak with my encoder settings or whatever. And hopefully we can get some support on Patreon and some other services, and we can start to scale up in our quality a little bit. But most people kind of watch this offline, so I'm really just kind of talking to myself at this point. And if anybody wants to make me feel less lonely, now's the time. Okay. So digging right in, if we go into WP content and then the themes, you can see I have the flood team theme. And so basically, if you've never developed a WordPress theme, they're just a folder underneath the themes directory. And then the most important part of it is actually inside of, I think it's, resources? No, I think it's under resources. There's a style.css, which strangely enough, this is where it kind of gets all of the information. So let me close all these guys down here. Yes, save that. Yes, I said save. Jeez. Okay. So this style file here, and again, I'll close everything. The style file is, oh my God, this hair will not leave me alone. So this style file here, this is where it gets all the information for your theme. So if we go into our themes here on WordPress, yes, I will leave, I understand. So you can see it says the flood team, and if I click into it, it has a little bit more contextual information. All of that is coming from this style.css file under the resources directory. And then the screenshot, which I don't have right now, the screenshot would be a picture of the actual final working product. So that'll be going in here probably tonight after I finish releasing this product. Then we have the index file, and it's just blank. I think it's required for WordPress, so that's just pretty much, I think it just stops. It might be a security thing, like if you have an index file, then it forces the Apache web server to jump into that file rather than showing you the folder of content. So I think it's a security thing. Again, hit me up in the comments if you have better information on this stuff. I am a jack of all trades, master of none. So then we have the functions file, and the functions file is probably one of the most interesting. This holds functionality for WordPress, as well as like some wiring that we can do in order to use shortcodes. And I'll explain that here in a little bit after I get a little bit more into the nitty gritty of how we've set this up. So then under here you have views, and then basically it's, if you've ever used Laravel, this is very similar. They use the Blade templating system to go about basically making little lumps of HTML and then putting lumps of HTML inside of other lumps of HTML, sounding very much like web components, right? But the difference here being is that anything that is in PHP has to be rendered on the server side. So the thing that's cool about Angular and React and Stencil is that they're JavaScript, so they run on the client, and they can also run on the server sometimes. So PHP, though, you're locked in. You have to render that on the server side. So when you're talking about making a very snappy application or something that has a ton of functionality that works really quickly, PHP is going to have the drawback of every time you want to do something with the language, you have to run back to the server and get the data and then come back to the client again where they can process that data. So we really wanted to just use the theme to kind of pop up the boilerplate for the actual Stencil application. There's a caveat though, there's a problem. So WordPress is built on PHP. So WordPress, we have to go back to the server and we have to get the data for the pages. But what we can do is kind of a cool little trick. We can actually use slots in Stencil. And if you've never used slots, it's documented on their website. But basically, it lets you take the content that somebody put inside of a custom element and then put them inside of, allows you to put the content from inside your custom element. It lets you put them inside of your actual custom element. So the easiest way to explain that is, let's just look at the layout here. So we have app.blade.php under layouts. And so this would be like the default layout for the entire application. And you can see at the top, we have our HTML and our doc type. We pull in the partials head. And then you'll see there's a partials folder, and this kind of has like little bits that we use on multiple pieces of our application. So like the head of the document, the footer, the sidebar, stuff like that. And that way you can actually go about editing each one of these individually. And note, again, these pieces, these partials, these blade PHP files, these are things that can't be edited by the client. So these are things that you're going to be in charge of if you're making the WordPress. You're going to be in charge of making these tweaks and these edits. So that was one of our goals when we were doing this. We wanted to hand over as much control as possible to the client so that we don't have to do a whole bunch of work on this thing to change content on pages and stuff like that. And if we had built this solution 100% in Stencil, our chances of handing off the functionality, handing off different pieces of it, were going to be almost zero. And it also was going to be almost zero if we had build everything with a custom, We also would have a problem if we had built it completely in WordPress. We wouldn't have the freedom that we have to build these web components because we work with this client on their management tools, their multiple websites, things like that. So with all of the stuff that they have going on, it's really helpful for us to spend more time building web components, building these tiny reusable pieces so that we can kind of forward everything or like keep everything moving forward. So if we stopped and built this custom WordPress theme, then the second that he wanted to implement something that we had done on the website on one of his other projects, we would have said, okay, well, we've got to rewrite that whole thing. And again, this is where Stencil is really useful. So that's what we've kind of done here. So going back to this file here, and you'll excuse me for jumping a little bit, but going back to this file here, what you can see is that we've got the body tag, we apply some classes. I'm doing a little bit of WordPress PHP magic here, and I'll explain that here in a second. And then I get the header. So this is what this line here, number 10, this actually goes out and gets the WordPress header. The header that WordPress puts onto every document, usually I'm not sure exactly what is in there. I think it might be a couple styles or like, and again, if you're WordPress Pro and you're sitting and watching this right now, or even later, feel free to comment and let me know exactly what's in there. I'd have to read the documentation to know for sure. But basically, it's all of the things that that WordPress is going to put at the head of your document. And then we have this FT app tag. So this is where we come into our first component. And so what I've done here is I've got FT app, and then I'm passing in a menu prop, and then a brand name prop, and then a title prop. And then you can see that I've got some curlies in here. And these are blade syntax to put variables. So all I'm putting in each one of these is the menu is the actual menu. And you can see that's what this lump of PHP that I wrote does. It actually goes and gets, via WordPress's functions, it goes and gets the main navigation on the website and then turns it into JSON. And then I take that JSON and I pipe it into my actual FT app tag. And then that allows me to have access to it as a prop inside of my FT app, and then I can actually use that in my components. One caveat with this solution, we ended up building also into the page, we ended up building in a site navigation at the bottom of the page, which I'll show here in a little bit. We ended up building a site nav that had all of the links. And the reason why we did that is because this lump of JSON, from my understanding, is probably not going to be recognized by the search engine. Like, it might be read, but it's not something that will be very understood by the search engine. So seeing the links on the page and all that stuff is very important. And since we're using Stencil to render components and stuff like that, we're going to lose out on search engines if we don't bake a lot more of the page when it's actually served up to search engines. So you can think of it like this. Like, if you've ever gone to a page and you see the loading sign, like you see the loading symbol on the screen, that means that like the page loaded up and it's blank. It has no content on it. Then when it's loading, it has to go out to their server to fetch the code from the back end, or fetch the data from the back end, and then serve it up to you. And then the content pops in when it's finished loading. So the search engine doesn't have those JavaScript mechanisms to like wait and say, okay, I'm going to wait for this page to load. Okay, now let me read the screen. It goes very much based on what you first hand back. So in this case, and for anybody who's like super SEO heavy, I'm aware that there are some abilities like there was for years ago you could build an Angular application and certain pieces of it were readable by search engines. However, the rule of thumb is that you want to bake most of the data into the page, and we've got a really brilliant how to bake with Stencil. We've got a really brilliant video on that, on how we are baking the data in, because we did that same technique here. Since we're using a standard or more old school backend that has to render all the stuff, we actually are baking the data directly into the page, and then we're actually then JSON decoding it, the prop, whenever we actually get into that component. Okay, so moving on here. So now we've got this FT app, and the FT app is, again, it's got the brand title or the brand name, which is just the name of the blog, and then it's got the app title, which that's the actual title of the page, the current page that we're on. So I'm passing all of those in as props to the actual FT app, and then inside of here, if you've never done this, this is where the slots come in. So you can see from the opening to the closing of my FT app here, I've got all this content in here. So this is all of the content of your page. So if we go back to the blog here, you can see, I'm going to head on over to like the About Us page. Probably going to look like crap. Yeah, there's my head. Okay, so you can see that we've got the content of the page, and then we've got the sidebar, and then we've got the footer. All of that comes from here. So you can see yield content is going to be the content of the page. We've got, if it's got a sidebar, it's going to show the sidebar. And then we've got this spot down here where it includes the footer. So all of that is the content of the page. And it's got to be baked in because, again, WordPress is using PHP, so it has to go back to the server and has to get the lump of HTML. But the difference here is that we're then taking that content and we're passing it into a component, and then we can have free roam with it. We can start putting our own components in the page. We can start really designing around it. And if you're seeing it here, this is the mostly finished product. I'll head on over to the Flood Team Difference page because this page really hits it home. So here you can see this is the end result of what the page will probably look like. Here's that site navigation that we built in. And again, all of this data is coming from WordPress. So the client has 100% access to edit the sidebar, to edit the navigation, the widgets in the navigation. All of that stuff is editable by the client. The section, the page content, all of it's editable by the client. Nothing that we directly have to make. And in fact, what we've done is we've made widgets out of components. So each widget that you see here, rather than this, or other than these two, they're kind of built in with WordPress. This guy here, as well as the contact us section, not the sitemap, but these three guys, they're all built as Stencil components, and then we're actually just using those components inside of the WordPress theme. So that's super beneficial because, again, we could take the same content and we could put it into another application because we have the Refer a Flood app. We probably are going to be using the same type of widget on their website. Different theming, but we can take it and put it into that project with little friction. So awesome. Well, before I jump into the next part, I'm going to do the old plug-a-roo. So if this has been helpful to you in some way, please consider supporting us on Patreon. And hello to everyone at home. Please feel free to chat me up. I'm a lonely developer looking for friends, So if you want to hit me up on the messenger, or follow us on Twitter, at MadnessLabs. Send us a hello. We're very friendly people. Most of the time. And then also please subscribe to our YouTube channel. We have tons and tons more resources coming this year. We even are playing with the idea of going back and teaching another class like we did last year. So we've got a lot of different things that are in the works, but we're very passionate about the Stencil community. we love what they're doing with web components and how they've become kind of a first-class citizen. And we also are super huge on the PWA community. And then we also are just really passionate about development in general. We've been fighting this fight for years. This company, the Flood team that we've been working with for a good part of 7 years now, we adopted a web-first solution back then when Ionic didn't even exist. And we've fought for that ever since. And the good people at Ionic have provided us a lot of great tools over the years. And we've built things around those, and we've had nothing but great success. And we look forward to kind of keeping that momentum and being a driving force in trying to make this a more mainstream thing. I think there's a lot of people right now that are stuck in their current solution. There's people that are in an old project, an Angular 1 project, or an old PHP or a .NET project, and you are looking for a way out. You don't see much of a way out right now because everything is built and wired up in the way that it is. But that's where web components come in. So if you haven't checked them out, go to stencil.com, StencilJS.com. Again, link description. Check them out because they are by far the most revolutionary thing that's happened to web development in the last, I'd say, 5 or 10 years. Well, maybe not 10. Five's good. Five's good. So absolutely one of the most revolutionary things, to go from stuff that was like big, giant, bulky libraries and JavaScript frameworks to now going completely frameworkless, is fantastic. And hopefully we can help be your guide to kind of starting that journey, as we have already started to adopt it. As soon as this went into beta last year, we adopted it full force. Have been building components since day one, and super enjoying it. Every part of it has improved our productivity, the speed at which we're building things, as well as the clarity, because once you get down to component design, and then also using like atomic design on your UI UX side, everything becomes very, very clear very quickly. So awesome. Well, I'm going to jump back in here. Okay. So again, we've got so this is the general script that we got, and you'll notice I have my service worker JavaScript down here so that we can enable some nice PWA awesomeness. I haven't tested this part of it out yet. I'm fairly certain, I haven't looked into this yet, but I'm fairly certain you can also cache like links. So we could cache all of the different pages in the application, and I'm fairly certain that we could actually get all those to save and really utilize the PWA-ness. But again, this being a PHP-driven application that could have changes that go on outside of us pushing changes, it might get a little problematic. Probably like what might end up happening is I might set up a cron job to run the service worker every X amount of time. But I don't know. And if anybody has a good solution for that, please reach out to me at MadnessLabs on Twitter, or feel free to leave a comment. Okay, so another thing that you might notice is, okay, so actually no, let's just jump now. So that's pretty much it. I mean, I ripped everything as far as like the package file, most of the views, I ripped a lot of those out, and just really got down to the core basic of letting this just be PHP files that is a WordPress theme, and then all of our components are built outside of the actual WordPress. And again, once I make this repository on GitHub, I'll actually kind of combine and put them into one folder. I needed to actually like run and test this and get this all up and running, so it's very much a work in progress. But when I get the project up on GitHub, it'll actually just be the theme, and that way you can install this into your whatever version you're currently running, and you don't have to install an entire version of WordPress just to get the benefit of this component theme. I think we're calling it StencilPress. So, that might be a thing. So, okay. So I'm going to jump into FT app. And what we can see here, and I'm going to shrink this guy down so we have a little bit more room. So what we can see here is I start with an Ion app tag. Then I have FT navigation. And you can see that I take my menu items up here. Up here, my component will load. No, my component did load. I take the menu items, and I'm doing off of that baking with stencil video. If you've watched that, I'm doing that same thing here. So I'm setting a state item or a state property called menu items, and then I'm basically just checking to see if menu is a string. And if menu is a string, I'm going to try to parse it as JSON. And then if it's not a string, so it's an object or an array, I'm going to take that and then I'm going to set it to menu items. This is how we've kind of dealt with things like we're working in a .NET project, as well as we have some PHP projects like this WordPress. Anytime that we're forced to like deal with something external, a lot of times, or server-side rendering language, a lot of times we just bake the data via JSON into the actual markup, and then we go about rendering them to our state when the component loads. Okay, so then I get all my menu items, and that's actually what makes my navigation over here. So again, this is completely controllable via the WordPress admin panel. So I can go in there and make my menu navigation any way I want. I can even put sub items under here, and it just feeds that JSON into that component. And then we can actually, in the component, control the stylings and the click bindings and all that kind of stuff. Okay, so then there's the stuff that comes with the Ionic PWA. This stuff mainly is for, this stuff here is just for the service worker. So every time a new version comes out, they've been nice enough to include a little piece of code that gives you a nice toast message that says, hey, there's been changes, click to reload, which used to be a pain in the ass to set up. But they've kind of just like handled it for you now, which is awesome. So then down here we have the sitemap that I put into the page. I'm adding a click event listener on that guy in order to make this nice little expand and contract feature that I got going on there. That's pretty awesome, right? Okay, so okay, let me jump to, yeah. Okay, so then we've got the render function, and in here I've just got a regular Ion app. Then I'm putting in my navigation. Then I've got a split pane, so that's what controls the that. So you can see that as I get bigger, the navigation automatically pops itself out, and then if I get smaller, it goes about tucking that menu away. So awesome feature. I've been waiting for that to drop on Ionic Core for a while, so I could try it out, and I'm super thrilled with the results because that used to be a real pain in the ass to set up. You can see I just split when the screen is large, and it just does it. So let me go to this view for a second. Oh no. Okay. So then what we've got is we've got a Ion content tag, and in the Ion content I have a list. Sorry, I've got a message here. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so in here I've got a list, and then there's my menu items. So, oh, sorry, I lied earlier. I am putting the items into my navigation, but the navigation actually on this application just consists of this top bar. The side menu over here is actually inside of the page. I just built a lot of this stuff, so again, it's a little fresh to me, which means I should probably know it better. But regardless, it's working. So as you can see here, I'm looping through all the menu items, and then I'm creating Ion items for all of them. And again, we've got all of this Ionic awesomeness without having to actually work inside of a WordPress theme. So we're building everything inside of our Stencil components, and we're able to use all of the things that we love from Stencil and from Ionic and stay away from the PHP, which blah, gross, right? So yeah, and then you can see we even got the nice little, oh man, look at that awesome click. Oh, it looks so good. Okay, oh, there's my ugly mug again. Okay, so now inside of here, below that, we have the FT social icons, which controls these little social icons down here. And then we've got the Ion grid for our partners. So these make these two little icons that sit next to each other. Awesome. And that's the menu. So that, and again, super awesome, right? We're actually using the stuff from WordPress, porting it into our components, and then we're doing all of the heavy lifting and the work here on the front end, which is freaking awesome. I'm super thrilled with how everything came out here. It was like a running concept, and then it really quickly showed how powerful it was, and I haven't even got to the best parts. Okay, so then we have the div with a role of main. And this guy is, if you've seen this is from like WordPress, but because this is how they dictate like their main content area. And I think the search engines use that guy as well. But basically, it has a main equals quotes. And if you try this on your solution, if you just installed Stencil, this is going to fail out because main attribute doesn't exist on div. And if you run into that, you probably need to head on over to your node modules. And then if you open up Stencil, and then I think it's under core, and then dist, and then declarations, JSX. And I probably need to learn like how to extend these interfaces better rather than just coming in here and like hacking away at it manually. But I come in here anytime I have like an extra attribute or something. So you can see here on the HTML attribute, DOM attributes, I added a main attribute, and that is optional and a string. So if you ever need to add a custom attribute, or for instance, like the for tag is missing under labels for some reason. So I had to add that in as well. So there's a couple little weird things, and if you ever need them, again, they're under that Stencil Core dist declarations. They just recently moved it because they have so many of them. Yeah, and it's in that jsx.d.ts, and this kind of controls the typings for JSX's rendering over all that HTML. Okay, back to live action. Okay, so let's jump back in. Where was I? Come on. You can do it, back button. You can do it. Okay. Awesome. Okay, so there is our awesome main content area. Then we have our page, and this was a requirement. I had to, in order for, like the way that the split nav and the way all that kind of stuff is set up is it's all positioned like absolute. So your document scroll doesn't really work so much anymore. After you get the Ion app and the split menu and all that stuff, you'll notice that your content doesn't work. And that's because you need to put an Ion page in there so that an Ion content, and that actually is where it'll put the scroll container so that you can actually get the nice smooth scrolling awesomeness that you're accustomed to. Okay, so then we've got our page banner, and this is where we come across our first slot. And no, I don't mean like at the casino. Okay, there's my head again. Woo. Floating head. Okay, so this guy, this slot, as you can see, it has a name of banner. So I'm going to go ahead and close out my navigation for a second, and I'm going to pull up the actual theme here right next to it. So what you can see, what's happening here is these waves down here, right? Those are my FT waves, and I can control the color with this nice little color property, and that generates these waves. Well, right above that is our banner, right? And you can see there's my big ugly mug up here in the top. So this slot name equals banner, this puts in content that comes from inside of our FT app component. So over here you can see FT app. I have a bunch of content that loads in. And it's probably easier to see down here later in the page. So you can see footer is slot name of footer. And you can see right here, I have a div with a slot attribute equal to footer. So that's going to take whatever I put inside of this div element. it's going to take that and put that inside of here in my component. So where and why this is useful is, again, WordPress is generating a flat HTML page, and it's going to hand that off to my web browser. The web browser is then going to render over it with JavaScript, and then that's where the components come in. So then the component's going to take that content and then do some ninja acrobatic moves, slice it all up, and then put it into all these different areas. So again, that allows us the most flexibility to be able to build this thing like a web app, a progressive web app, but still have content that is SEO friendly and searchable coming from WordPress. So it's kind of the best of both worlds. Obviously, anyone who's watching this or has comments on it, obviously the most awesome solution you could have would be if you could have Stencil running on the back end, server-side render it, and just use WordPress as an API. But I feel that this is a pretty good solution for most websites out there. And again, the end goal being that we just want to start building components and then making ourselves a library of things that we can use as we move forward. These old marketing websites, or just marketing websites in general, are really going to always be really driven towards search engine optimization. And whereas apps are kind of getting there, where search engine optimization comes in, I think in general, you've kind of got two different competing goals. You know, an app needs to be on your device, snappy, full client side, but a website that generates a lot of content, or a marketing website that has a lot of content, they're really optimized for search engines, and search engines want all the content baked into the page. And we're going to see a change in that, I have a feeling, over the next couple of years. But for the most part, that's kind of how the landscape is at the moment. I think this is a good hybrid, somewhere, a happy medium in the middle. Okay, so let's go ahead and finish walking through this, and then I will show you where the awesomeness comes in. So we're looking at time. Okay, we're good. Okay, so then we have our Ion card, and that's where this content area comes in right here. So this is where the content area of the application goes. And you can see that I have a slot name of card, and then again, I have that slot of banner up here. So I also have a slot of sidebar. We can see that div with a slot of sidebar over here. So there's no magic about any of these slots except for banner and card. You'll notice that we don't see banner and card inside of this content. I know it's probably a very wordy, and if it's coming through at 360p, it probably looks atrocious. But you can read this along when you download the repo, or when you see this after the fact. Promise. So you don't see those slots anywhere inside of this code. And the reason why is because we actually put these slots inside of the actual WordPress pages. And we had to do it in a weird but awesome way. And it ended up allowing us to do some crazy integrations, and it really opened up the doors to a lot of possibilities. So I'm going to show you how that works. So on this page, for instance, you can see my head is in the top, and then we have the page's content. So if we go into the admin panel here, and I go into my pages, and I'm actually going to shrink this guy back down a little bit. So I'm going to go into my pages, and let's go into the About Us page. So as you can see on this page here, and I'll go into the visual editor. So as you can see, I have a banner slot, what are they called? Hold for my ignorance. They are called shortcodes. Okay, yeah, shortcodes. That's right. You can tell how much I build WordPress stuff. Okay, so these are called shortcodes for people that are a lot smarter than myself. So these shortcodes allow us to put in like little lumps of HTML code and functionality without having to actually be technical and know kind of what we're doing. It's kind of funny because like you can get people that design WordPress things to like copy and paste these things in there, but you swap out those brackets for a couple of of carrots, and people go fucking nuts. It's crazy. But whatever, that teach their own. So one thing to note, and the reason why we have it hooked up this way, is one, again, for the client, to make it easier for them to understand. So when they see this, they can very easily depict, okay, there's a picture and it's in the banner, and then there's a content section and that's got all the page's content. So one, for the user. Two, it's also because WordPress natively strips any extra elements out of the page. So if we go into, I think it's in, no, it's actually in, under the roots WordPress theme, if you go into app, and then I think setup. Oh God, where is it at? It's in one of these files. I think it's in filters. So basically what I'm getting at here, basically there's a list, and you can edit them. Again, there's some place inside of these files here where you can actually edit the tags that it allows to go through on your themes. But basically, long story short, oh, here it is, add theme support. So you can see HTML5, this adds support for these tags onto the theme. So if I wanted to, I could go through here and I could add in support for all of my custom elements. And then I could go inside of my text editor, right? And I could put in all of my custom elements. However, we took a different approach because, again, once you put those divs or whatever, once you put those custom elements in there, if you were allowed to use them in the code, once you put them in there, they're gone. Like, they're not visual. They're going to disappear because they're HTML elements, and so your client won't really know where the top of the page is versus where the content of the page is. And again, you might not have this problem if you're just using it to just fill in a content section. Maybe this is overkill. Maybe this isn't necessary. But hopefully the practice of what I've done here is something that you will find useful. So what we've done is we've kind of taken components, and instead of telling our clients, like, okay, here's a list of HTML tags that you can use, and expecting them to edit this mess inside of the most unfriendly editor ever, instead of doing that, we instead created shortcodes, and we wrapped shortcodes around a bunch of stuff. So I'll go down here to the bottom of my functions file. So again, if you jump into your theme, then under resources, then into functions, you'll get this file. And at the very bottom, there's probably already one pre-made. And if there isn't, feel free to follow along here. But as you can see here, I have the banner function, and then it takes in props, and then it has a content. And then you can see that I return a little lump of HTML content. So you can see this is where I do my div slot is banner, and then I pass through in the center of that div, I pass through the content. And then I have to do this extra little option because my content could have shortcodes. So this is something that you have to do on WordPress when, like, your shortcodes can contain other shortcodes. So it's like shortcodeception. So like this is what allows you to kind of render that. But basically, again, when you put a banner, it just takes the content of whatever's in between there. So in this case, my picture, this image tag, and then it puts it inside of this HTML element that I mark up. And you can see then once I make the function that does that, I then add the shortcode, say what the shortcode is going to be as far as like what they're going to type, the user's going to type, and then pass in the function that it's going to run whenever it actually sees that shortcode inside of the lump of text. And I've also got one for content, so that's what makes this content section here. And both of them are the exact same. They're just popping the content of whatever's in between them into a slot with the corresponding tag. And then it actually then, again, if you go back to my FT app, you can see that I have the div with a slot of banner going at the top of the page inside of my page banner. And then inside of my Ion card on the left column, I have the slot name of card being popped in there. So that's what gives us the end result that we see here, where we have the content area that they've typed. In this case, Wayback Machine. In this case, the content of the actual page is going to go into this left column, and then we have the picture that they put in the banner shortcode going at the top of the page. So all super awesome. So we took that to the next logical extreme, and we started actually wiring up all of our components. So as we've been building components, we've then been like wiring them up in the functions. So as you can see down here, I've got as a more in-depth example, or a more sophisticated example, we have down here the FT icon. So I've rigged up an FT icon, and these are, I basically just made a copy of all of the icon functionality for Ionic, except I made them for our own custom internal icons that we have here. And so if I go back into my page editor, I can up here at the top, maybe above my content, I can use this shortcode, and I'm going to put ft-icon. And then what I can do is put name equals, and let's do a self-closing one. And I can say name equals, actually I don't even think I need that if I'm not mistaken. FT icon, name equals fan. So let's use a fan icon. And then I can say update. And now if I refresh my page over here, you'll see that we have a fan icon. So, and if I inspect it, you can see that I get the SVG, there's the FT icon component. So we've taken the component, we made it in our Stencil components, then we come into the functions file, wire up the actual component as a shortcode, and that stops WordPress from filtering out that content when we submit it or going invisible to our client. So you can see that when the client comes back to edit this, they clearly can see that there is going to be some kind of variable content that's going to get swapped out. And hopefully you're naming your components fairly easily to understand what they are, so they can easily insert pieces of content. Like we also have here, you can see FT or social icons, which I probably need a prefix with FT, but you know, whatever. Social icons. So when I now do social icons, it's going to then take the social icons that we built for the navigation here, and it's going to allow us to then pop that directly into the page. So not only do we have components to work with, and see, look at how awesome that is. So not only do we have components to work with, not only are we happy as the developers to churn this stuff out and to build components that are reusable, we also can hand that power over to the person that's editing the website so that they don't have to be super techie in order to put some HTML on the page. They can use these really simple shortcodes in order to then pop in our components, which we're hoping has a huge impact on how their ability to edit their actual WordPress. And you can see again with the icon example, so I'll switch this back to FT icon. So you can see that we have like name hooked up, so like maybe I'll do fan, or let's do water. And then I also have a size attribute, so like maybe I can do like 200 pixels, so I can make it like really big. And I'll update that, and I'll refresh. Oh no, I did something wrong. One too many spaces, maybe. T icon, FT icon. All right, let's try that out. Everyone make Emily feel awkward as she walks by.
Hello. How's everybody doing today?
It's Emily. She's the starving artist at Madness Labs. If you want her to be less starving, you could donate. Donate. Oh, this wrong way. Yeah. There. Donate there. Donate to our Patreon. Also, follow us on Twitter at Madness Labs. Subscribe to us. Those are all great things. They're great things that let us know how much you love us like we love you.
Super great.
Yeah. So we've got a meeting coming up tomorrow, so she'll probably be scribbling away in the background on her DaVinci Code. Yeah. So let me see why this isn't working. Let me try it, update it again. Water break, water break. Yeah. So it looks like I had a rogue space in there, caused it to be no bueno. But yeah, you can see I actually wire up in here the name that comes through as one of the props, as well as the size, and then you can even set defaults here using the shortcode ATTS function that that WordPress gives you, as well as their extract, and this will actually let you kind of like set defaults. So I've set the default as fan, and the size is going to be defaulted to whatever the component has. And again, I'm taking the content from inside of it and putting it inside of the actual component. All of this stuff, super useful. And again, you're handing over the functionality to the client to allow them ultimate freedom to be able to take those components and use them elsewhere. So awesome. That's pretty much the gist of the awesomeness of that. Other places that we kind of were utilizing the components are, as I said, in the sidebar here, we're actually utilizing components as well. So if you go into your WordPress and you go into your theme editor and you edit your widgets. So you can see here we've got a primary and then a footer. And you can see this one has a custom HTML of refer a flood, and then the recent posts and the calendar. All of those correspond with what we have over here in our sidebar. And all of the styling, again, all the styling can be written on our FT app. The styles and everything are getting compiled and built into the www directory, and then we're using all of that inside of our WordPress theme. So it allows us, again, super flexibility to change all of the styles and do it inside of the stencil build process where we're really comfortable and familiar, and then still kind of utilize all the awesomeness of WordPress and their wonderful publishing platform. So here you can see we have a custom HTML tag, and all it is an FT RAF widget. I'm fairly sure, I'm not 100%. You might be able to use shortcodes in here as well. I'm not sure. Again, hit me up in the comments or follow us on Twitter, add us on Twitter, and let me know if you can or can't. I've not even dared to try, to be honest. I just felt it was unnecessary. They actually give us a nice HTML editor for once, so I figured I would use it. But you can see all I'm doing is just popping in this RAF widget, which has all of the layout, and that way, again, I'm able to use this somewhere else. I don't have to worry about I don't have to worry about editing a bunch of HTML and then throwing it away once they decide they don't want to use WordPress anymore, or we want to use that same piece somewhere else. I can then just take that component and use it elsewhere. Cool. And again, you'll see like these are like the standard built-in stuff. So again, that's the great part, is that like you have the ability to style, add click bindings, and do all kinds of stuff to the things that are being handed back to you from WordPress. Since they're inside of your component, you can call them out, you can manipulate them, you can do all the things that you're used to, as all part of the theme. So this will allow our client to install any widget they want. Maybe a subscribe functionality or this or that. They can then just take those things and then use them inside of the navigation, use them inside of WordPress just as they're used to. So for instance, maybe I want to drag in an image gallery. I can just drag that in here. Test images, and let's just add an image of my ugly mug again, because I love putting my ugly mug all over this website. Okay, so now if I refresh the page, you can see that I'll have a vaguely styled widget. It's all built in. It's just freaking phenomenal. I'm super thrilled with how this came out. I don't know if you can tell with how many times I've said it. Yeah, super happy with how this came out. Going to allow our clients to do what they're used to, interact with a tool that they're familiar with, and allow us to do what we're good at, building components. Also, again, same thing with the footer here. This contact us little widget at the bottom of the page. It's powered that exact same way. It's all built with Stencil, all built with that awesome functionality. and then it's actually just put into the page via a custom element tag. So super useful, super helpful, and I hope this cast has been too. I'll show you a couple more things, just little things that I've done with this process, as this will also kind of be like the starting documentation for this StencilPress repository that we have going on. So one of the things that I needed was I needed a way to better manage environment variables. So if you've ever worked in Laravel, they have a really nice environment variable system. So as you can see here, I have this env file, and we have like all you hackers out there. Look, this is your chance to hack into my local host and get into all of my databases. Um, so so um, so again, this is like the config file. So this, instead of using the wp config, which we still have, but we load these variables in there. So this allows us to commit the wp config file with our repo, and then we make this environment file per environment. So in this case, on my Windows machine, I have these set of variables. This environment file, env file, doesn't commit to the repo. You can see it's even darker gray inside of our VS Code. You can see these guys are all like kind of white, and then any of these ones that aren't committed, they're all this darker gray. And so that is going to allow us to edit the actual variables per environment. And I installed that with Composer. So you can see here, this is my Composer file. If you've never used Composer, Composer is a lot like Node or Node Package Manager for PHP. So it's the exact same principle. It just installs PHP packages rather than JavaScript Node packages. Okay, then like I said, I loaded all of those .env variables. I loaded all those into the wp config file. That way I could change them at will or per environment, and not have to worry about like resetting up this wp config file every single time I make a new project, because it can be a pain in the ass. Is there anything else? Oh yes, and then the other notable thing that I did is, again, I wasn't happy with they had their own build process that had Webpack and all these different things inside of the Roots Sage theme. I wanted to just go with a full stencil solution. However, that creates some problems when you're trying to like run a live syncing on a PHP application. So generally, when you launch your Stencil web application, your build process, when you run that process, it loads a JavaScript web server and serves up the HTML page. In this case, I need it to serve me the PHP page. You can see here that like all of my content has been rendered with PHP. So like the water drop icon started out as a shortcode, which then got converted into HTML, which then got converted into the actual page that we got. So we have to have the ability here to actually load up a PHP web server. So in order for me to do that, I had to, again, you have to have XAMPP installed. So this will install a local Apache MySQL web server. And then what I usually do is as you can see from this tab, I usually make a virtual host. So if you've ever made a website and you've hooked up a domain name, that's a virtual host. So you're telling it like, this is what you can see. This is the domain name that you're going to type, and this is where you're going to route on my computer. So I do that for these projects, and then what you can do is then kind of proxy with your JavaScript web server. You can proxy one address into another. So really hard to kind of again, I'm like tripping up trying to really explain it, because like as I hear myself talking, I realize how like crazy and nerdy it sounds. So it's best just to show you as I do. So if you jump into your computer and you run into this PC, you're going to say, ow, because you just ran into a PC. You should watch where you're going next time. But then after you get over my bad puns, you'll see that your local disk C is incredibly full and you need to get a new hard drive. But once you get past that and get back to what you're trying to explain here, you'll go into your local disk C, then you'll go into Windows, and then if you scroll down in here, don't be afraid, there's lots of files. There's a System32 folder, then there is a Drivers folder, and then there is an etc folder. And after all of that digging, you will get to this file, hosts. And hosts, if we open this up on VS Code, which I will do. So hosts has a list of basically addresses and what they should bind to. So if you've ever been infected by a virus that kept redirecting your Google, or ever installed pirated software, I see you. I see you. If you've ever installed pirated software, this is a lot of times what they'll go and they'll tell you to make changes to. So this binds an address on our computer to some kind of address, a virtual host online. So in this case, the floodteam.localhost is going to link to 127.0.0.1. If you don't know anything about computers or networking, that's called the loopback port. So that is basically the port on your computer that represents your computer's network card itself. So this is your computer. So basically that's saying when you see this domain, you're going to browse to my computer. And then what your PHP web server does is your PHP web server then sees that you're trying to navigate to this web server. And again, when you head to a website, you're on port 80. So you're going to go to your network card on port 80, and then whatever web server that you have, be it Node or be it in this case XAMPP, it's going to pick up on that and then serve you the content. And then if you do edit your vhost file a lot, then it helps to have something called host admin. And this is just a Chrome plugin, and I will edit the description with that as well to add this link. But this is a plugin for Chrome that reads your file and then allows you to, after you browse and find it via that location I just gave you, it allows you to see all of your virtual hosts, and then you can actually even toggle them on and off. So if I toggle off here, it failed because I need permissions. Screw it. Why not just show you that as well? So it's going to give you some permission issues, and it's going to do it every freaking time. There we go. It's going to do it every time Windows does an update because they like to reset all the permissions on everything, which is probably smart. But you're going to need to give yourself access to this vhost file so that you can actually edit these items. Because obviously, if you're, again, like I said earlier, if you're a virus, stopping people from going to Google on how to get rid of a virus is pretty helpful. So that's usually what people do maliciously with this. But you just copy this little text here under Windows or Linux or whatever operating system you're on, and you just copy this guy. And caveat is open this guy with regular command prompt. If you're on a newer version of Windows, there's PowerShell, but PowerShell doesn't recognize this command. And then I'm going to do Control-Shift-Enter, and that's going to open up an admin version. And that way I make sure that I have permissions to run this command. Right-click is paste inside of terminal. And so now you can see that I've pasted that command there, and now it says processed file. And that's how you know that it was successful. If you get a lump of red text or some kind of an error, then you probably didn't run the right command, or you're in PowerShell. Are you even listening, bro? Okay, so there we go. Now we should have permission. I might have to close this and reopen it. I don't know. It's kind of finicky with that. Okay, so now I'm going to try to toggle off. Let's toggle off the flood team. There we go. Okay, cool. My error went away. And now you'll see that if I refresh this page, it's a champ. It wants to just continue working. Oh, well, I'll be damned. Well, if everything is working correctly, then you should be able to unclick these guys and it will unbind the address. Some people like to bind over the actual production websites. I don't recommend that. I like using this .localhost so that you have a very clear depiction of what is on your local machine versus what's online. And I chose .localhost not at random. I used to use .dev, but I since switched to .localhost as I was told by Chrome browser or something that it was like, no, that's a no-no. You should use .localhost. So I've switched. I'm a good listener, and apparently a good talker. I'm just like blabbing on for an hour and 11 minutes. Okay, so the next thing again. So now you've got your virtual host set up. You've bound some domain to your local computer. Now you need to edit one more file. So this would be where you go into your C drive again, and if you have XAMPP or WAMP, it'll usually be in the C drive under a folder named that. It'll ask you and prompt you when you do the install, so just pay attention to where that installs. If it's not in one of those places, it's either under the users, under app data. That's a really popular place for apps to store, or it'll be under the program files or program files x86. But in this case, my file that I need is going to be under XAMPP, and then Apache, and then we're going to go into conf for config, and then we're going to go into extra. And then in here, there's a file called httpd vhosts. So this vhost, this is what I was talking about earlier. This is the virtual hosts. So these are the list of hosts that you have bound on your computer. So just sending an address to your local computer, 127.0.0.1, that isn't enough. You actually have to set up on your web server, in this case Apache, we have to tell it to take that domain and route that to a certain folder on our computer. So that's what I've done here, and I will open it up. I usually drag mine and pin it to my VS Code, so I don't have to come looking for it all the time. So I'll just open it from there. And you can see here, I've already got a couple of them set up. So I've got one for my htdocs, which just is the server name of localhost. And then you can see down here at the bottom, or right here above, or below that one, I've got virtual host at port 80. So it could be localhost 80, or it could just be 127.0.0.1. That's what that star means. It kind of means anything, any port or any address on my computer. And then port 80. So this colon here is for denotating ports. And 80 is the default port that the web browser uses to go about getting web files. So 80, and then we have the document root, and document root inside of a virtual host file just basically tells it where to serve the files from. And then we have server name, which is the domain name. So now you can kind of see, like, it starts out with like, okay, you edit your virtual host so that you point a domain name to your local computer's IP address, or 127.0.0.1, the loopback. Then you go in this file and point that domain that you hooked up, you point that file to a folder on your computer. And then the Apache web server takes over and serves up the index file, and that loads the web page. But that's generally what I do. And then again, the difference here, because I've got this thing hooked up, as you see here, localhost 3245, and then I'm actually viewing the actual application live. So if I actually do like ft app, and I go to the top of the page here, let's go right below the banner. Let's go in the card. So if I go in here and say you'll see that my page should, if my build server is still running. Yep, so you see that there it caught the change, and now it's reloading the page. And this, again, generally wouldn't be possible because we're rendering here, in this case, a PHP page. So if this were our regular stencil build process, it's just running a Node.js web server that doesn't have the ability to process PHP. But in this case, I'm kind of building my stencil components and then proxying my actual local web server to serve up the PHP content. And I think because I'm streaming here, it's dragging a little bit. It's also been like a day since I've restarted this thing. There we go. And I have a couple caching issues. I don't know if it has to do with the proxying or what, but every now and then I have to go about empty cache and hard reload. There we go. Now you can see okay, cool. So how that is working is the interesting part, Bobby. Come on, get to the meat. Okay, so how that is working is I've made a slight change to the package.json. So in my package.json, rather than the usual start command where it runs dev and it runs the dev web server and all that kind of stuff, instead of doing that, I actually go about running a sync command, and sync command just runs browser sync. And if you've never heard of browser sync, it's basically a JavaScript web server that watches for changes, much like what's already kind of given to you with Stencil. They've already got a very minimalistic web server built in, but this is another web server. And the reason why I'm using this one is because this is what I'm using to proxy the content for my, or proxy the WordPress PHP website to being this localhost port 3245. So if we go here to my bsconfig, because you can see it's pulling in my config file from bsconfig, you can see here that I have set the port. That's not right. No, that's right. So I've set my port twice for some reason. Oh, okay, that's right. This is the UI. So browser sync gives you a nice little browser sync panel. Show you all the devices you're hooked to and everything. Super useful. So I've set my port to 3245, and then I'm proxying here the floodteam.localhost. So that's why this page is actually being fed the content from my localhost. So now when I make changes on my stencil components, when it does the hot reload, it's going to do that reload from the floodteam.localhost. And then that's what's going to cause it to actually render my PHP page and hand me back all the content. So that's pretty much it as far as like how this stuff is all hooked up. Again, I'm going to have back to my webcam. Okay, so that's pretty much it for today. Hopefully this was informative. I'm going to update the YouTube description with the link with virtual hosts, examp, and some other little things, so that you guys can kind of click through and get the stuff set up for yourself. But yeah, that's kind of like our dive into integrating components with WordPress. It's been really powerful, and using slots was awesome. Yeah, using slots was great for being able to like take pieces of a page that's already generated and to like get control over it with components. And then using the actual shortcodes in order to then hand the ability to make or to move those components around on the interface, to hand that to the client is going to be super powerful. And out of everything, I think that to me is the most exciting, is the ability to then hand control over to somebody who's less technical, and give them the power to say like, oh, I wish we could take that button and move it down. I wish we could add that banner over here. I wish I could change the banner of my website. All of these things, because of the way that we've built this, all of these things are achievable by the client. And if you've ever worked with clients on WordPresses, on websites, you'll know that that's one of the most painful parts of the process is working with the client to figure out what their needs are. And then as they change, you kind of have to work and rework, and it can become really frustrating. And it's frustrating for you as a developer because you have to keep coming back in and making changes and updating things. And it's frustrating for them as a user because they don't understand it and they don't know how it works. So I think this offers a really robust solution that lets you do what you like best as a developer, keeping things clean and simple, and then also doing that same thing for your users when you give them the control to edit these things. And you're putting it in a place that's really, really nice. WordPress has done so much good work over the years making this admin panel. And then there's also just a ton of plugins and tons of stuff. So this kind of gives a good happy medium between the progressive web app world and building with components and the CMS solution of WordPress. So again, if you enjoyed this, please, I can do this. I gotta remember it's over there. She's laughing at me. She's laughing at me. Okay. So yeah, if you could head on over to our Patreon. Also, again, follow us on Twitter. I don't have these cards on my actual webcam, so we're gonna look at my head in a Pokedex again. So feel free to follow us on Twitter at MadnessLabs, and subscribe to us on YouTube/MadnessLabs. We have more content coming. Hopefully, we're gonna start doing like videos throughout the week that kind of maybe take these lessons and crunch them up a little bit into more bite-sized chunks. We're open to ideas. And again, as I said in the last cast, we're getting a little bit better about trying to put our content out and what we're going to be doing each week. Trying to theme these things a little bit better, naming. You can see we've got a title card this week. So like we're making changes and going to be handling this much like our web development iteratively. We're going to be handling it by just little accomplishable tasks that we can do each week to make this better for you. And please, as with the app development process, feedback is 100% necessary. So if you'd like to see us cover different content, if you'd like me to wear a crazy party hat, or if you'd like Emily to dance when I'm talking on for hours boringly, then like please just let us know in the comments on social feeds. We're very receptive. This is all about helping you guys and really stay on the cutting edge. We have a lot of fun doing this. We get to do this every day. We work together out of our house, and it's fantastic the amount of impact that we've been able to have, and we want to share that with all of you. So please feel free to let us know what you expect, what you want, so that we can be better for you, because that's why we're here. That's why we're doing this. It's good. It's good. Awesome. Well, thanks for joining us, guys. And also, one last thing before we sign off here. We need to celebrate a little bit because we just got over 100 subscribers on YouTube. So we've met the first benchmark of like our own success. We wanted 100 subscribers. We need 1,000 though. So I mean, like, we need more. I mean, we got empty Pokeballs over here. Like we need 1,000 before we can get something good like a Mew, or I mean, like anything good. So like, please subscribe to us on YouTube. Tell your friends. We're all about. Look at her smiling face. She's like, look at that. She wants you to subscribe. She wants it. Yeah, subscribe. Subscribe. You'll make our UI UX person happy. And isn't that what it's all about? Isn't that what it's all about?
It is.
It is.
Making people happy.
Yeah, making people happy. Most importantly, UI UX.
Oh.
And if they're your wife. Number one. So yay! Congratulations on us getting 100 subscribers, and hopefully here's to the next 100. Again, we're going to continue this every week. We're going to keep covering different topics, and again, starting to do some polling, starting to do some different things to try to keep engaged with you guys. Maybe even some swag, some merch stuff coming up here. So keep tuning in, and we will keep you guys posted on new content as it comes out. And see you next week, guys.
Peace.
Peace.